Welcome everyone to today's webinar on navigating compliance in banking and finance, leveraging DORA to uplift operational resilience. So the Digital Operation Resilience Act is an EU regulation designed to manage and reduce technology risks in the financial sector. DORA was accepted in November 2022. Financial institutions and tech service providers must follow DORA rules by January 2025. My name is Wael. I'm the Director of Cyber Resilience at Cyber Rescue. We work with executives at hundreds of firms such as Virgin Money, Tesco Bank, Sainsbury Bank, and the Bank of China, helping them measure, monitor, and mitigate cyber risks. We're hosting today's webinar with Runecast, who help save money and time on compliance and compliance management and vulnerability remediation using their award-winning platform. They're trusted by the likes of HMRC, NATO, Ministry of Defense, and the US Army to provide the continuous analysis of compliance and vulnerability posture, reducing attack surface and bridging the gap between security and operations. Now, DORA is a huge challenge for many firms, so let's start by helping immediately. We'll be talking later about how leading firms are auto-reporting and auto-scripting for resolution of vulnerabilities that reduce operational resilience. But not everyone on this call will be familiar with why automation is important to implement DORA effectively. I'm delighted by investing the next 30 minutes to learn about this important topic. You will have earned a customized bespoke complementary assessment of your own critical systems. To maximize our time today, we'll be focusing on delivering rich content and skip the Q&A. But don't worry, we will offer a complimentary assessment in a few weeks to address all your specific questions. Please do note down your thoughts in the chat, and we look forward to addressing them individually. I'll be handing over to our main speaker, Michiel de Lepper, an expert on the topic. Michiel is Runecast Global Enablement Manager and has been in the IT security industry for over 15 years. Within Runecast, Michiel helps or works on optimizing programs and processes, enabling Runecast, channel sales, and technical reps to be more successful. Next up, Michiel will take the lead. So over to you, Michiel.
Perfect. Thank you very, very much, Wael. And thank you to everyone who's attending today. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about compliance, about Runecast, and particularly how we can help you. So what's in the menu for today, if you want? So I'm going to start off and talk a little bit about compliance. Now, since the target audience of this webinar, I think everyone should be familiar with compliance, but there's a couple of nuances in there. Then I'm going to shift gears a little bit. I'm going to talk about the complexities and then a level of preparedness. And we're going to shift gears there again and start solutioning if you want. So we're going to talk about how you as an organization can get on top of your compliance needs. And then we're applying all of that knowledge to DORA. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about how Runecast can actually help you with all of those steps. And then we have some next steps to close off, which Wael already hinted at, but we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that at the end. So without further ado, let's get started on this. And if you have any questions, even though we're going to be going through this quite long in terms of the time versus the content, if you have any questions, please do note in them because we will get back to you with answers. If not today, then some other day, but you will get an answer to your questions, absolutely. So let's start off with compliance. And really what I want to discuss here is why compliance is important. And we all know we need to be compliant and we need compliance to do business. However, what we don't really think about regularly is why we actually need that compliance. Yes, we need compliance in order to do business, especially in a highly regulated industry like the financial sector, for instance. But there's an underlying reason why we need to be compliant. And that is that compliance helps an organization to implement a set of checks and balances to really ensure that they're operating as safely as possible. In essence, compliance is driven by breaches. And I always think that a picture says more than 1,000 words. And what you see before you is a visual representation of data breaches. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. This goes until 2022, and it's only with 30,000 records or above. So it's not even the full picture. So compliance is driven by breaches, but also the need to minimize risk to your organization to prevent those breaches from actually happening. That is the main driver for compliance. Not because you're processing payment card information, so you need to be PCI DSS compliant. Absolutely, you need to. But the underlying reason is the fact that you need to be compliant in order to minimize your risk. Now, great, we're just going to be compliant, right? That's easier said than done. Because one of the things that we need to take into account is really the complexities of the modern environments that we have to deal with. And really why visibility is very much the key to being prepared for compliance. So let's talk a little bit about the enterprise architecture and the transformations that we've been going through overall as an industry. So we started off with offices and remote sites, but then we went collectively through an infrastructure evolution or a transformation, if you want. And we started hosting all of our data and applications in our private clouds. So that was the first infrastructure transformation. After that, we entered the cloud age, which we're still arguably massively in, of course. And the second infrastructure transformation is really when we started to migrate into Azure and AWS and Google Cloud, the cloud IaaS and PaaS infrastructures. And then we started to transform our business. And we did that by starting to leverage the SaaS applications. Things like Office 365, Slack, Dropbox, ServiceNow, you name it, Salesforce. All of these things help us to do business. However, the reality is that environments are getting more and more complex as well, because more and more solutions are being added each year. And this is done to cover yet another technology that's introduced. And each time, this requires more training, more time spent, and yet another set of reports that gets added. And all of this happens without really creating a holistic view of the actual problems that you're facing. And the paradox here is really that by adding more technology to help you, you continue to lose visibility. And this is very much you can't see the forest through the tree situations. And you can't protect what you cannot see. So if you don't have visibility over where you operate in this massive forest, you'll never be able to protect it. So let's switch gears here a little bit. And we're now going from the problem statement more into solution. And we can kind of wrap up the complexities and we start to look at how we can address these challenges. And in order to do that, we're first going to start with a compliance maturity model. And really, this is a model which every organization will have to go through if they're thinking about compliance. Now, most of you hopefully will not be in the reactive stage, but you'll be further along. But very, very few organizations will be the optimized state, which is the true gold standard of where you want to be. So let me briefly go through these and the 5 different stages that any organization will ultimately go through. So we start off with reactive. And reactive is really where my compliance efforts are really ad hoc. Everything is done in a siloed way, and it's very uncoordinated. And we then move to the preliminary phase. And this is what I tend to call the oh dear moment or the oh dear phase. And this is where there's a need established. Generally, that need is established in 2 separate ways. Hopefully not at the same time. The first one is you fail an audit, which is bad and not very pleasant, but ultimately not very disastrous. Yes, it will cost you time and money and a lot of things, but it's not the end of the world. The second option of a need being established is you're having a breach, which can be a lot more disastrous. But suddenly there's a need to establish this compliance. So you're going to start by implementing basic policies and basic controls. And very quickly, you're going to realize this is not enough. So very quickly, you're going to move into the defined stage, which is the middle stage. And this is really where you're going to establish leadership and you're going to establish overarching policies across your organization. You're going to start to implement controls to monitor and to measure your compliance efforts. And because this is very, very hard to do and keep on track of, you're going to start with very basic automation in this. And you're going to discover that while you go through this process and you're spreading this out through your entire evolved infrastructures, you're going to very quickly move up to integrated. And this is really the stage where your compliance efforts start to be really well funded and staffed. You have very clear cross-functional and organizational-wide policies and procedures in place. And with this comes very effective controls, but also effective measurability of compliance. And you're adding more and more automation. And then finally, the golden standard of compliance is where you turn into optimized. And the optimized state is really where continuous compliance is established. Your security and your compliance culture exists throughout your organization at every level. And you have very comprehensive processes and policies in place. And these processes and policies operate across geo and across the entire tech stack and across the functionality within your organization. This leads you to have a very high degree of measurability, and you have a high degree of automation as well, so you can continuously measure that compliance and always improve upon it as your environment and infrastructure changes. So our goal as Runecast, among other things that we do, is really to get you from wherever you are now to the optimized state as fast as possible. So with this, I'd like to ask you a question. And this is a question that's brilliant when I'm in front of an audience. It's a little bit more difficult when I can't see you. But ask yourself, how mature are your compliance efforts across your organization? Just think about that for a second. And generally, when I ask this in front of an audience, I see people nodding and they're kind of like, yeah, okay, yeah. So my next follow-up question to this is always, how do you know? And the reality is a lot of the times you don't. Because you may have passed an audit 2 weeks ago. That's great. 2 weeks ago, you were in compliance. But how about now? Do you actually know? And a lot of the times you don't. And this is an issue because we've established that the main driver for compliance is minimize risk. So how do you get on top of this? What can you do to get to that optimized state as fast as possible? So we're going to take that maturity model and we're going to move to what things are that are required to get to that optimized state as fast as possible. And all of this starts by going back to the basics. So I initially mentioned how in a complex environment, visibility is very, very important. And visibility must be the very basis upon which all the other steps are built upon. And this means not only establishing visibility across what's known, but also finding the unknown dark corners of your infrastructure. Again, you can't protect what you can't see. And not knowing always means being reactive. So policies need to be established inside the organization about things like cloud usage and personal assets. And you need to be able to discover that web server that's sitting in someone's basement that everyone has forgotten about, but I guarantee you every organization has at least one of them. Asset management and discovery need to be part of the process for compliance. You need to have visibility. It's the very key foundation that everything else is built upon. Now, building upon that achieved visibility, we now need to start putting policies, procedures, and controls in place to really tackle the first aspect of our infrastructure, namely vulnerabilities. And for this, you need to scan the entire environment to really discover where you're vulnerable. And you put processes and controls in place to achieve very good coverage and efficacy. And after that, you need to start to prioritize so you can get to a timely remediation and align those limited resources and efforts to where it is the most critical first. And one of the key aspects here is really the need to have ownership assigned to both of these sets of tasks independently and to put reporting, and to put tracking in place for your vulnerability assessment, but also your remediation efforts. Because this will allow you to know how many vulnerabilities you have, how many new ones you have per given time period, but also how many you're actually fixing. And then this allows you to look at the processes behind all of this and start to tweak your own processes. And then naturally, once we've tackled the vulnerabilities, and this goes hand in hand, we start to look at compliance, because a lot of the compliance frameworks also deal with vulnerabilities. And we all know there's many different compliance and security standards, and they all have variations in the bodies of checks and the required adherence in them. So the first thing an organization really needs to do is you need to establish what's regulatory, what's internal. So which standards are a must to follow and which ones are a nice to have. And you need to do this across any technology and across any geo that is being served. And organizations need to start preparing for audits, not when the auditor has announced the audit, but as part of the course. You need to start to run continuous reporting, and you need to put those controls in place to ensure that standards are followed. And any potential of non-compliance can be very swiftly and efficiently remediated. And by now we've discovered that all of this is really, really hard. And it's really difficult and time consuming to do. So we need to put automation in place. And now that we have those proper policies and procedures in place, and we know where our efforts are, we can deal with remediation if and when it's needed. We're still not as efficient as we should be in our compliance efforts. What we've created so far by following these steps are reporting, assessment, and remediation policies, which drastically increase our level of compliance and reduce that risk exposure that's so important. But the last and final step to truly optimize is to make sure that these processes are automated, is to limit the human input required to keep your infrastructure secure and compliant. We can use all of our policies and create automated rules for how organizations actually deal with new vulnerabilities. Think about alerting, for instance, or a configuration that's coming online that's out of compliance, and how to remediate this, and how to remediate this using automation tools, for instance. And when all of these steps are created and they're followed, the organization has effectively created a continuous compliance framework, which not only automates the discovery, the classification, the assessment, and the remediation, but also has created controls that monitor and measure adherence, adoption, and potential risk exposure. And you've done this with as few manual steps as possible, essentially making your organization audit ready at all times. And this is really the end goal of that optimized state, of that continuous compliance state that we're helping our customers to achieve. Having an auditor call over shouldn't be a big problem. You should just be able to run the reports, because the audit isn't the driving factor. It's the risk exposure and the minimizing of risk that is the driving factor of compliance. So henceforth, you need to always be compliant, continuously. So with this knowledge, let's apply this to DORA. And let's discuss DORA a little bit more in depth here. Because DORA is still relatively new. And I'm saying relatively new. I have a timeline in a couple of slides that will highlight this. But it's really important that we discuss this. So what is DORA exactly? So DORA is the Digital Operational Resilience Act. And it's essentially a new security standard. And it addresses a very important issue in the EU financial regulations. And it's transforming the way financial institutions actually are approaching digital resilience. And if you are in the banking, financial service, or insurance sector, also known as BFSI, understanding the complexities of DORA is vital, as it impacts your daily operations, it impacts your security protocols, it impacts your compliance measures, and so much more. And since this is a EU financial regulations, it certainly is not optional. You need to start considering this. Because DORA was actually published, the draft for DORA was published in 2020. And it was officially adopted in 2022. And then on the 16th of January, 2023, so this year, DORA already entered into force. Now, whenever an act like this is being introduced, generally you have a 24-month implementation period. So on the 17th of January, 2025 is D-Day, or as I call it, DORA Day. This is where you as an organization are required to be DORA compliant. And you might think, oh, well, this is more than a year away. I have more than enough time. Speaking out of experience, you don't. Unless you are already in that optimized state, you need to start thinking about this now, and you need to start acting upon this now. Because there's actually quite a lot that's involved with DORA. So let's unpackage DORA a little bit and look at the key responsibilities and the key challenges that you're faced with when it comes to DORA. So when we look at the key responsibilities, we can really divide them into four. And the first one is digital resilience testing. And this ensures that systems are regularly tested to really identify vulnerabilities and to assess resilience against potential disruptions. So IT practitioners must develop and oversee protocols that include things like stress tests and scenario analysis. And then the second part is incident reporting and management. And this includes creating and managing strategies for a prompt response to significant digital incidents. This also includes coordinating with relevant stakeholders and complying with DORA's reporting requirements that are part of DORA. There's the third-party risk management, and this calls for conducting very thorough assessments and continuous monitoring of risk related to third-party service providers. So IT practitioners must actually establish and enforce risk management protocols to align with DORA standards across the entire board. And of course, lastly, there's the technology investments. And really, this entails aligning with up-to-date technology standards for things like risk detection, prevention, and mitigation. So IT practitioners really are responsible for evaluating, selecting, and implementing necessary technologies and tools that adhere to DORA's requirements. So by now, right, we should have a very decent inkling as this is not easy. And when we look at DORA, there's a number of key challenges that we really need to take into account when talking about this. So the first one is your compliance complexity. Understanding and complying with DORA's various rules and regulations can be an incredibly complex task. And its various provisions covering different aspects of digital resilience can lead to complexities in understanding exactly what's required and how am I going to implement this. And then secondly, you need to integrate this with existing systems. And the seamless integration of DORA's rules may require modification to your existing systems and processes. And this then secondary involves a potential complicated alignment with your current IT infrastructure, including changes to your data handling, so your security protocol, and so much more, which can be or will be very difficult and very time consuming. And all of this obviously comes with cost implications. So complying with DORA's requirements involves a significant financial investment in technology, in training and staffing, And meeting these compliance needs with budget constraints, especially for smaller institutions, this really presents a considerable challenge. And it requires careful financial planning and management. And of course, DORA is just one of the many, many frameworks that you may need to be compliant with. So replicate this time and time again across all of the different compliance frameworks. And it's going to be very challenging. So you may have noticed that I haven't really talked about us at Runecast, but in order to truly understand what we do, it's very important to understand all of the things I just talked about. But in short, Runecast platform can help you. And we can help you with all of these aspects that I mentioned before. So Runecast offers a single platform with a true single architecture and not a mismatch of different solutions that you somehow need to integrate. And with this platform, you're able to effectively manage your security and compliance, your containerized deployments, and streamline your IT operations. And we do this across on-prem, hybrid, and multi-cloud. So much so that we're now entering into an official partnership with VMware around DORA compliance. So we're extremely excited to be working with VMware to really address these challenges that the financial services firms are facing in gaining visibility into and managing your EU DORA compliance posture. And doing this in a multi-cloud world. And to us, it's a huge validation of all of the hard work that we've put into this space. But as mentioned before, right, we have a solution, but that's not it. Because there's a lot of things besides having technology in place. Yes, we can give you that visibility. We can give you prioritization and automation. But it's about processes. It's about ownership. And in order to that, we really trust our partners. Partners like the Cyber Rescue Alliance that can help you with effectively implementing our solutions. And not only getting us up and running, which is very easy, but building that whole house and structure of processes and ownership around that. So with that, there's a couple of next steps after this webinar. So I'd like to hand it over to Wael again, and he'll explain to you in a little bit about what this actually means. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that, Michael. So we've touched on compliance and DORA today, emphasizing the importance, as you said, of continuous compliance and enhancing the resilience of critical systems through automation. Now, each firm has unique challenges, and to address this, we will offer each delegate a personalized consultation to identify and tackle specific issues, ensuring your systems are not just compliant, but resilient. We're eager to extend our support with the help of Runecast, and we're looking forward to answering any of your questions and provide further clarifications in these upcoming consultations. So please do look out for a follow-up email tomorrow with an invitation to your personalized assessment. I'd like to thank our speaker, Michael, because you've clearly demonstrated the expertise from working with firms like Ministry of Defense, US Army, and NATO. And more importantly, I'd like to thank all of you, our delegates, for investing your valuable time to explore challenges and opportunities of DORA with us. We're here to help, and we're committed to ensuring your systems are optimized, resilient, and demonstrate compliance with DORA. Thank you all, and have a great day.
And on behalf of Runecast as well, thank you, Wael and the Cyber Rescue Alliance, for hosting this together with us and lending your expertise to this as well. And on behalf of Runecast as well, thank you all indeed, like Wael said, to all of the delegates today who were here and sacrificing your valuable time to actually attend this. And I hope you learned something, and I hope this piqued some interest. And I hope that at least talk to us and let us help you in helping you with that journey. So thank you so much. We'll be in touch soon. And if you have any questions, don't ever hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.